Hi everyone, today let's look at Netflix earnings. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. So Netflix reported earnings, and it was really the first big one here for earnings this season, and they said in their investor letter they're going to stop reporting subscriber gains, so they're going to focus more on free cash flows in my opinion, and that also indicates it's potentially going to slow down in its subscriber growth. So far the subscriber growth was good, but like I mentioned here, they're going to focus on more mature metrics like free cash flows, as well as earnings and revenue. This is a significant change for the company, but you can see here they did announce 9.3 million subscribers added in the first quarter of this year on the back of that global password sharing crackdown, as well as the add of their ad tier at $6.99, which is less than half the price of their standard plan. So everything's still going pretty well here for Netflix. But on the back of this, the stock did fall approximately 4% after hours. We'll take a look at the charts. And they did project a revenue growth of 16% in second quarter, but just 13 to 15% for the full year. So a little bit weaker than expected initially. And then investors probably not liking the lack of transparency from Netflix. It is still my opinion that Netflix is the face of the streaming wars, but it'll be interesting to see how this company does going forward. And then looking at fear and greed, you can see here we did not move today. 34 yesterday, 34 today, neutral in momentum. Still fear here in strength and breadth. And then put call ratio continuing to rise, still in extreme fear. We'll look at that on the charts. Volatility not changing, safe haven demand not changing, and then junk bond demand back into extreme greed. We'll take a look at that on the charts as well. Looking at seasonality, again, supposed to be bullish here. We're not getting that bullish move right now. Just keep it in the back of your mind. Moving over to earnings, you can see Netflix beating on the top and bottom lines. Big beat on earnings. I'm not sure why markets didn't like it a little bit more. Probably because that forward guide not so great. Alaska Air beating on the top and bottom, losing less than expected. And then looking at Friday, Procter & Gamble, American Express, definitely interesting. Moving over to the economic calendar, pretty much everything good here. Initial jobless claims lower than expected. Philly Fed manufacturing way better than expected. Existing home sales not super great, but just a very slight miss. And then Fed balance sheet selling off a little bit more than $30 billion. And then looking at tomorrow, there's nothing important on the calendar. Moving over to Max Pain, you can see Max Pain is now all the way down at 500. 500 level still looking like it's going to hold. Huge amount of puts there, huge amount of calls there. Between 500 and 505 makes sense, right in this kind of dip low area. 4.2 million options, so it is very strong, and then put call ratio quite high, so really not expecting too much more downside tomorrow. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps, you can see we got more lows. We got a lower low, but we didn't move down too much on the day. 0.21% momentum continuing to go lower here. But we saw moments of bullishness. We got some trend lines. I added some structure here today. Starting to look like a falling wedge. Falling wedges are typically bullish patterns eventually. So we might see a dip low, rally, lower high setup. Seems like the move right now. Momentum did not step down too much more here on the daily chart, and then once this starts to step to bullish, that could be interesting. You can see we're actually up a little bit after hours, so that's encouraging. See how this plays out tomorrow. It's still very bullish in structure, but it seems like it's setting up for a move here eventually. Moving over to the Tasty charts, you can see we are still on that lower ATR band. That's currently sitting at 499.47, so we are just below that 500 level, and we did close below it, which is not great. Momentum still bearish here. No real volume coming through yet. 4-hour chart, you can see we're starting to drift away from that lower band. We've been grinding along it here for a couple days, drifting a little bit higher. Second ATR band starting to hold. We're still not above any of the EMAs, and you can see ATR stop still up here at 510. But momentum stepping to bullish on that last candle. We'll see if we get any movement here. And then looking at the hourly chart, you can see definitely starting to show some signs of structure. A little bit of volume coming through, flatlining for the last couple hours of the day after the slight bump in the pre-market and then dip in the mid-session. ATR stop on the hourly sitting at 503.95. Moving over to Microsoft, you can see it's down about 0.57 on the day. Trying to give this some structure here too. It seems like we're developing a little bit of a trend line. Not much, still falling very sharply. Doesn't look nearly as good as the S&Ps. Momentum still gaining to the downside. It did look a little bit better there for a minute, and now it looks worse. So we're coming into this low at 421.92 like I talked about. That is an interesting level. Wick low support and then rallied from there. So interesting zone, right at trend. Certainly could touch that zone tomorrow. Still looks bearish going into tomorrow's session, and it's down a little bit after hours on that Netflix move. Moving over to the Tasty charts, you can see that lower ATR band, 421.55. We'll see if we hit that tomorrow. Seems very likely. Momentum still bearish here, basically the same. And you can see the ATR stop moving slightly lower here as well, now at 446.75. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, again, a little bit more bearish than the SPY. You can see we're riding that lower ATR band, 421.82. Continuing to close on the lows, down a little bit more after hours. And then looking at the hourly, actually looks a little bit better, holding that second ATR band, starting to curve up a little bit. And then you have the ATR stops here at 427.72 on the hourly chart. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, you can see Russell down 0.08, still hanging in there. 191.89 is the support level. Basically flat after hours, still hanging in that zone. If it's going to bounce, it really has to do it now. Certainly could find some support at the 200 and the 144 down at 189.80. And then looking at the Dow, it's consolidated for 3 days in a row here, slightly positive on the day. Seems like it's finding support at 376.35. Momentum again rolling to bullish. Some signs of support here coming in on the Dow. And we talked about it before, the Dow led us to the downside, and it seems like the Dow might be setting up here to lead us to the upside at least a little bit. Moving over to Netflix here on the 12-hour chart, you can see that move down after hours, over 4% now, 4.8% on that last candle of the day. Got all the way down to 567.80 or so after wicking all the way up to its previous highs at 641. And zooming in a little bit, you can see that 144 EMA sitting at 578.74. If it's going to find support, probably needs to do it there. You also have a highly traded zone here, 164, and a level 155.79. You can see the consolidation here before we did push higher eventually. We are oversold already on the 12-hour chart, and then you got that 200 SMA sitting at 549.54. Moving over to Trump Media and Pepsi. We've been watching these a couple days here now. Trump Media finding a massive bounce off of that 200, 25.72% to the upside. Massive break higher, volume coming in, momentum rolling to the bull side. Seems like this has some legs on the back of that share announcement. And then looking at PepsiCo, had a massive day yesterday, 1.18%, and then another big move here, 1.65%, momentum rolling to bullish. Pepsi breaking to those most recent highs. Looks like this could head here to that 176.75 level, and that would be a break of the 200 SMA on the daily chart. You can see we haven't been above that since all the way back here in August of 23. So if Pepsi breaks here, could have some pretty decent legs. Medium term price target at this high going back to July of 23, that would be 192.28. Moving over to the Mag 7 down 0.06, still holding that 55 EMA 343.61. Super important level here. This actually seems to be accelerating a little bit, but I don't really think this is going to break down massive. These are still the companies that you want to own in any conditions, so I don't think it's going to break down huge. 333 would be your next support, which again doesn't give you a ton of downside. Momentum and RSI still bearish, but could see a little bit of a bounce from here in my opinion. Moving over to Apple and Tesla. Apple down 0.57, pretty much the same as NASDAQ actually. Still holding that level at 165.71, haven't tested that yet, but you can see this is a new low close relative to these previous lows, so Apple still very much a bearish structure. Just had a big wick high on some AI news, and now it seems to be breaking down further. And then moving over to Tesla here, down 3.55%, big down move. We looked at this as a little bit of consolidation, thought it could potentially hold here just above that 152 level, and then we gapped through it and fell. So that is very bearish. Now we have to kind of zoom out and try to find some structure because you can see we're in a gap. We're looking to fill the gap. Zooming in here to that massive gap higher, that would give you a gap fill down around 144.36. So we're finally looking to get that gap fill at that level. Let's go ahead and zoom out here a little bit so you can see it. Looking for that gap fill maybe tomorrow even. So that would give you a price target around that 144.60 area. That's pretty much right in line with this trend as well. So if we hit that trend, then we could see a little bit of a bounce. That could be interesting. Still looking for structure. Still looks very bearish. So not saying to jump into Tesla at all. Momentum RSI bearish, structure very bearish, falling knife and everything. So just keep that in mind. Just looking for some potential areas where we could see structure. Moving over to Amazon and NVIDIA. Amazon down 1.14%, breaking that level. 55 EMA 176.01. That's probably where we headed. We have some trend there as well. Go ahead and extend that out a little bit. So trend support down at 175.50. Momentum and RSI definitely bearish. So still showing weakness in one of those Mag 7 names. And then you have NVIDIA hanging in there, holding that level. 843.36. Tested the trend line, bounced from there, didn't quite hit the 55 EMA. That was at 822.64, and the low of day was 824.02. So missed it by just a couple of dollars. It's a little bit of a bearish sign to me. Momentum and RSI still bearish. That's a little bit of a bullish sign for me. but momentum and RSI are still bearish. Moving over to staples and discretionary, staples again finding bullishness, 0.46 to the upside, momentum rolling to bullish. Seems like this is about to head a little bit higher. Still a downtrend, 21 EMA sitting at 74.73, so that could be your zone of resistance, highly traded zone there as well. Doesn't mean that this is going to go right back to the highs or anything, but this is a solid move. Starting to see some legs, momentum rolling, RSI above the SMA, and in contrast, you can see discretionaries dumping again on that Tesla move, down 0.62. We hit the 200. We talked about that happening yesterday. And then you have the level 170.68, super important level. You can see these previous lows, consolidation at that point. We technically closed below it, which is not great, at 171.26, below that 171.33 level, getting a little bit of a bounce from there after hours. If it's going to hold, it needs to do it now. Again, if this structure breaks, we could be looking for a gap fill like we saw on Tesla all the way down to that 162 area. Moving over to transports and financials, these have been the two that have been moving. We've been watching these for a couple of days now. Transports still going lower, 0.17. Interesting to see those go lower day after day, considering that the Dow is staying flat. Momentum and RSI bearish, not oversold yet. Next level of support would be 64.89. And then financials, again, finding a little bit of legs, 0.35, holding that 39.70 level. Momentum rolling to bullish, might see a bit of an upswing here. 40.77 would be your level of resistance. And then you got the 21 and VWAP hanging in that 41.10 area. Moving over to breadth. Look at this move here on breadth. It seems like there's some strength coming into markets here tomorrow. Breadth bouncing from that 7.75 level, starting to swing higher. 16 is the next move. Engulf those two previous candles. Talked about these wick lows. Momentum looking good from oversold conditions. And then you got the 50 days, same thing, step down on momentum, starting to wick up to that 32 area. Seems like this down move might be coming to a conclusion a little bit. S&Ps look good, Dow looks good, Russell and the Qs are still struggling, but breadth showing a little bit of a bottoming here today. Moving over to yields, you can see 2 years still in this consolidation, closed on the high. See if this pushes up to 5 tomorrow. Trend is still holding, touch the 9 EMA here today. Still looks like it could go higher. Similarly on the 10-year, touch that 9 EMA, bullish on the day. Next level for that would also be around that 10 level. But this is 3 days in a row of consolidation, hanging in there. Momentum on both of these starting to fade a little bit. You can also see some lower RSI reads on some higher prices. So we'll see if this starts to roll a little bit to the downside. And that would definitely help out equities if it did. Moving over to the dollar here on the hourly and the daily, you can see the hourly bounced a little bit off of that 144 EMA. So that's what we're finding as support right now. Back above all the EMAs and SMAs on the hourly, but momentum starting to fade. Could be a lower high setup coming off of that resistance. Remember, this trend was the price target. Touched it 2 days in a row, rejected from there pretty strongly yesterday. Slight retrace here today. Looks like we're going to establish a lower high, and then we could see some pullbacks in the dollar. And if that does happen, that should spell some bullishness for equities. You can see how overbought we were on the daily chart. It does seem like we might get a bit of a down move on the dollar tomorrow. Moving over to JNK and TLT, you can see both of these on momentum starting to roll to the bull side a little bit. Definitely interesting. Hanging in there, we did get the gap down, gap up, so that looked strong. Rejected from that 89.16 level. But like I said, looked like yields were starting to show a little bit of weakness. JNK still hanging in there, positive day 0.13, coming off of that 200 SMA. So could see another slight bounce, push up to that 93.60 area. You would expect a lower high setup and push down, but that doesn't mean we can't get a little bit of a short-term bounce here, and that is worth trading if we get it. Moving over to volatility, you can see volatility has been pulling back a little bit, starting to find a little bit of support in bonds, makes sense. VIX also selling off just slightly, not a lot, still at resistance, still holding this uptrend, waiting to see what happens going into tomorrow's session, but you can see 2 steps down here on momentum, might dip a little bit lower, again, maybe establish a higher low, and then see a push, which would fit with the thesis of a short-term move higher in equities. Moving over to my accounts, I managed to make a few dollars here today, even with the down move, so you love to see it. IWM position, lost a few dollars on the day, not terrible. And then Q's position, continuing to roll these puts out in time to try to protect myself to the downside. You can see we're down even more after hours, so might have to do a little bit more protection. Might take a slight loss on some of those, but I still have the calls, rolled those out and down to 428. And then I have one here at 437 for 13 days from now. So in terms of deltas, not a ton, just 30 deltas. That's what I've been able to collect some profits on that. Plenty of theta protecting my downside. And if we start to see a little bit of a bounce, I should be in a good position. I'll take this short-term call off and then might leave this longer-term call on. We'll see how it plays out. going into tomorrow's session, still falling after hours on that Netflix move. Let me know down in the comments section what you think of the Netflix move. Is it an indicator of where the mega caps are going to be going after this earnings season, or is Netflix its own market? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.